Hello, Miss. Today, my classmate Cynthia Troncoso and I, Maria de Los Ángeles Betancourt, are going to talk about listening skill. We would like to begin this presentation with an anonymous quotation. Quote, "Every good conversation starts with good listening." End of quote. What does it mean? It means that listening is a very important skill that we have to develop in order to acquire the complete knowledge of a language. Here is the index of our presentation. You can see the contents that we are going to develop. What is listening? According to Van der Grift, listening comprehension is not either top-down or bottom-up processing, but, quote, "it is an interactive, interpretive process where listeners use both prior and linguistic knowledge in understanding messages." Furthermore, according to Rust, listening in its broadest sense is a process of receiving a series of orientations. These orientations are receptive, constructive, collaborative, and transformative. Receptive orientation is about what the speaker says. Constructive orientation is about constructing and representing meanings. Collaborative orientation is about negotiating meaning with the speaker and responding. And finally, transformative orientation is about creating meaning through involvement, imagination, and empathy. According to Wipf, 1984, listening skill is an invisible mental process making it difficult to describe. End of quote. Why this is too difficult? Because listeners have to discriminate sounds, understand vocabulary and grammar structures, interpret intention, as well as socio-cultural context. As a conclusion of this content, listening is a complex and active process of interpretation in which listeners have to match what they can hear with what they know.
Acquisition of listening. According to Newmark, 1981, quote, "A comprehension approach can work as long as the material presenting for the comprehension in fact consists of sufficient language instances whose meaning can be inferred by students who are paying attention."
Types of listening tasks. According to Correa, 2012, there are three main types of listening tasks: with non-linguistic responses, with minimal responses, and with longer responses. Non-linguistic responses could be picture drawing or ticking items in a list. Minimal responses could be yes-no responses or true-false responses. And finally, longer responses could be answering comprehension questions or making predictions. There are some more examples that you can see after our presentation. Listening process. According to Van der Grift and Noonan, there are two distinct types of listening process. The first is bottom-up, in which students use linguistic knowledge to understand meanings. And in top-down processing, students use prior knowledge to understand a message. This prior knowledge could be the topic, the listening context, the text type, or any information that we have in our long-term memory as schemata. Schemata is a mental organization of the world of knowledge that we have in our minds. In the case of bottom-up processing, students build meaning from lower level sounds to words and to grammar relationships to lexical meanings to get the final message. Also, Noonan adds a new listening process which is called reciprocal listening. Reciprocal listening is about interaction, in which, for example, I listen to you and then you listen to me. Here, Van der Grift asserts that the degree to which students use each one of these processes depends on their knowledge of the language, the familiarity with the topic, and the purpose of their listening. Listening in language teaching and learning.
How learners use strategies. Socioaffective,
which describes the techniques that students use to collaborate with others, to verify understanding, or to lower anxiety.
cognitive,
Which manipulates the material to be learned or to apply a specific technique to a listening task.
metacognitive,
Which oversees or regulates the listening learning process. Here you can see that a study of O'Malley and Chamot in 1990 and also a study of Van der Grift in 1997 shows that skilled listeners use more metacognitive strategies than their less skilled counterparts. That's because they are capable of analyze the requirements of a listening task, activate the appropriate listening processes required, make appropriate predictions, monitor their comprehension, and also evaluate the success of their approach. Types of listening performances.
as stated by Brown 2007. There are 6 types of listening performance.
Reactive,
Students only repeat little meaningful processing.
intensive,
Focus component on discourse, developing a bottom-up skill.
responsive,
Short performance of teacher language designed to obtain immediate responses.
selective,
Longer performances of discourses to catch selected information.
extensive,
Using top-down skill.
interactive,
Interaction student-teacher and teacher-students. On the other hand, according to Nathan and Newton 2009, there are 2 types of listening performance,
one-way listening,
typically associated with the transfer of information. Transactional listening,
two-way listening,
typically associated with maintained social relations. Interactional listening. Teaching of listening. Quote, Brown 2007. Some practical principles or designing techniques have been the result of several decades of research and practice for what is teaching listening comprehension. Stage. First stage. Pre-listening activity. Purpose. to get a student interested in the topic, to find out what a student already know about the topic, share his knowledge, to activate vocabulary.
Some examples are looking at pictures and talking about them and brainstorming a list of items.
Second stage, while listening activity. Purpose, to develop particular skills and strategies.
An example could be marking items in pictures.
The last stage, post-listening activity. Focus, to continue that the student acquires the content.
Here we can find a speaking activity using the listening context.
Nation for strength. Balancing the four strands. Not only had meaning focused input and output activity, but also include fluency developed and only a very small amount of language product learning. An example of integrated four strands in an activity could be to watch a video, then the student share ideas about the video, and finally to make an essay about the video.
As a conclusion, we can say that L2 listening is a complex skill to be developed consciously. Listening can be best developed with practice without constant evaluations. It is because using listening activities to only test comprehension leads to anxiety, debilitating the development of metacognitive strategies, which are the most important strategies for skilled listeners. And finally, we, as teachers, have to guide students through the process of listening, providing the knowledge by which they can successfully complete a listening task, and motivating them to learn using their self-control about their own knowledge. That has been our presentation. Now, any question from the audience?
Yes, Maria de Los Ángeles. You mentioned that listening is a really important skill to develop. Why do you think is that?
Okay, listening skill is a very important part of the language because it's the first skill that we develop. And according to Paul Nation's four strands, we can find listening within the first strand, which is about the input. With this input, we can learn a language through understanding the meaning of the messages. That's why listening is important.
Okay. And Cynthia, can you define transactional and interactional listening performances?
Okay, transactional listening consists in that learners assimilate new information, construct concepts, and acquire new skills. Interactional listening consists in teacher and students wide accomplish class tasks.
Okay, thank you.